very excited by this panel, given the important role that innovation plays in facilitating energy access and moving the needle as we work towards a just energy transition. Innovation, whether in technology or financing mechanisms, is very important. And similarly small examples, such as clean cooking solutions, off-grid energy access, or small renewable energy installations, can really move the needle, particularly when aggregated across markets. And a good example that comes to mind is the role that a number of innovative solar home system providers played in some countries in Africa and parts of Asia over the last decade. These companies supported and helped millions of people get access to electricity for the first time. And a good example is the OPEC fund's financing of a private equity fund, which over the last 7 years has financed this set of companies and supported over 4 million households in enabling energy access. But Your Excellencies, the scale of the challenge is huge. Over 2.6 billion people still lack access to clean cooking solutions. Millions of people are dying as a result of indoor air pollution. Almost 1 billion people still lack electricity access as we speak today. So it's critical that the development community comes together and works with all stakeholders to ensure that the next frontier in innovation is unlocked, and also ensure that we remove bottlenecks to innovation.
Talking about smart energy is the future at this point in time. And I will explain to you with some interesting data points. It is also very important to underline the fact that these 2 points are going to shape up our futures. If you look at Paris Agreement, and if you look at its main objective of limiting the increase in the warmness of the weather to 1.5 to 2 degrees. This will only be achieved if and only if we implement smart energies and stop using carbon-based energies. The sustainable finance market overall is currently just over $40 trillion at this point in time, and it is expected to reach about 95 to 100 in the next 5 years. However, this was the first year, the first month for over 6 years, we have seen net outflows from the ESG ETFs. And it is quite a warning sign because when you look at the investors, they are actually growing quite massively, but the interest is waning a little bit at this point in time. And I must add that the regulators have done a fantastic job. So the regulation is catching up. The investors are a little bit sidelining themselves. The issuance is slowing down. What is needed is actually an accelerator, an accelerating factor, and that's innovation, innovation in finance. And obviously, we will listen from our fantastic panelists how this can affect other parts of this. So I would like to start by asking to Francesco the first question in terms of how he sees all this innovation, increase in efficiency, new technology affecting carbon transition. How do you see hydrogen, for example, playing into this?
We believe that the 2 main drivers of this transformation are energy efficiency. As you mentioned, that is naturally the way we can reduce the demand of energy, also through the use of the circular economy. And the other main driver is the electrification of the energy system. And this transformation is enabled by renewables. That will be the dominant block of the new energy system, and complemented by hydrogen, mainly green hydrogen, and sustainable biomass. So this is where we are going, and there is not much we can do for changing this course. What we need to do is to be consistent with the Paris Agreement goal, is to accelerate the speed and the scale of this transformation. Concerning the role of innovation, this is absolutely important, but what we want to be clear that if all the international community believe that this decade will be decisive in the achievement of the Paris Agreement goal, we need to have the technologies that we have now. And this means just the 3 dimensions that I have illustrated. Hydrogen could be very important in our point of view. It will account 12% of the mitigation efforts in 2050 will come from hydrogen. And green hydrogen is becoming more and more competitive. I think that we will reach already a very important impact in 2030, with the 80% of the energy share will be made by hydrogen. But I think that this guy just beside me will tell you a lot more that I will be able to say to you now.
So how do you finance this climate action, especially when we go through a period of crisis? What roles multilateral development banks actually have to address this issue?
Global cooperation is absolutely essential if we are to move to a more sustainable track in terms of global emissions. It's true that the combination of many crises, the ongoing remaining effects of COVID-19, impact on supply chains, inflation, the war, Russia-Ukraine, the sort of asset bubbles that are coming down in the US, and various crises, food and energy shortage. The worst that could happen is that all of these combine to make climate finance take a backseat. Why? Because the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, has told us that the world is actually on the course to double of the target of 1.5 degrees. The World Meteorological Organization says we will touch briefly 1.5 degrees warming within the next 5 years. So, and Swiss Re Institute says that if we don't change course, 20% of GDP will be lost overall, which is 5 times the cost if we actually do stick to the Paris Agreement, which was a very thorough negotiated agreement, but we are not yet on that course. So what does the MDBs do what can the MDBs do on this? It is estimated, again, by the IPCC that anywhere between $1.8 to $3.6 trillion per year needs to be invested just in the energy systems. And in order for these to happen, majority of them would happen, or a significant share, in the developing world. And given the challenges inherent to many of the markets in the developing world, whether it's perception of higher credit risk, limited ability of the grid to evacuate intermittent electricity, perception that the market is too small, it becomes extremely important that everybody's efforts are combined. It takes government, regulators, private sector, and the multilateral development banks are working with all of these players. This is why the multilateral development banks the last few years have been working to align all of their operations through frameworks about how to make every operation we do aligned with a Paris Agreement.
How can private and public sector collaborate to advance these climate goals?
At the Asian Development Bank, we believe that the climate change battle will be won or lost in the Asian Pacific, because the region by itself accounts for more than 50% of global greenhouse gas emissions. So last year, during the COP26 events in Glasgow, our president, Asakawa, announced our intention to become Asia and Pacific Climate Bank. And to that end, we have committed to provide from our own balance sheet $100 billion in climate change funding by the year 2030. And of course, we can deliver this assistance to the countries only in close collaboration between public and the private sector. And I mentioned 3 key areas where we're working here. First, it's renewable energy and climate smart infrastructure. As of now, about 25% of our own private sector portfolio, or 2.5 billion, is in this clean energy project, but we expect this share and this dollar figure to grow significantly and quite fast. And we're working on several areas here. One is to more upstream work to make sure that the governments are able to put together a bankable project. Second, working with the markets where the commercial funding is not easily accessible, especially in the conflict-affected countries or small island economies of the Pacific. And third, new technologies, including hydrogen, waste to energy, and electric mobility. About 30% of our agribusiness projects now have climate change components, and we expect this share to grow to 75% by 2030. And by that year, we plan to invest over $1 billion in this area. Just for example, in Pakistan, we are working on opportunities for private sector engagement for advancing technologies for mechanization and value chain management as a means to support improved agriculture productivity and improved food security.
As the Chief Investment Officer of a renewable energy company, ACWA, how do you see innovation affect your project development?
We have over 40 gigawatts of power installed or under construction, and we are very much focused on the energy transition. And I think for anyone who's in a role like mine or in an industry like this, it's a very exciting time because we are still very much at the beginning of this thing we call the energy transition. In terms of innovation and technology, for us at ACWA Power, it's just an essential part of every step that takes place. I mean, if you think about, you roll the clock back 10 years, what the prices were for solar power and for wind power, a lot of people were saying, look, it's great, but it requires subsidies and, good luck. Today, we are long past the point where solar and wind has reached parity or below with every other energy source. So the technical innovation has really enabled us to accelerate the construction and the development of those technologies. You see the same thing with batteries. Battery prices come down, down, down. And then obviously the most exciting technological advance that we are all looking forward to, as my colleague mentioned, is green hydrogen. So green hydrogen is the next step in the decarbonisation of the energy industry that we will be part of. We are constructing the world's largest green hydrogen facility. It's called the NEOM Green Hydrogen Project. It's a multi-billion-dollar project with 4.2 gigawatts of wind and sun generation that will power 2 gigawatts of electrolyzers to produce green hydrogen in a quantity of around about 250,000 tons a year. This is today under construction. This is the world's first. By 2030, the market for green hydrogen could be 20 million tons. So that means an enormous amount of new investment, and that's super exciting because this is the beginning of a new phase in the energy transition, which we all get to see. In 20 years' time, we'll look back and think, "Wow, this was the beginning of this era."
Rethinking our cities is unavoidable if we want to achieve climate action. The majority of global emission and the growing majority of population are in the cities. In 2019, we reached a peak where 28% of energy systems pollution came from cities. And by 2050, 2.5 billion more people are moving into cities. So this is the time when we expand the city or build a new city, like in Saudi Arabia, NEOM, where your green hydrogen project is happening. Have compact cities, new cities where livable, greener, and it's encouraging to see that 700 cities from 53 countries have committed to halve their emissions by 2030 and to reach carbon neutrality by 2050.
How do you see the renewable energy sector responded to recent macroeconomic events, COVID-19, the war in Ukraine, the volatility in markets overall, how it is impacted in your view?
Yeah, we made the case that, again, the best way to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic was working on renewables for the very simple reason that reacting to the depressing effects of the COVID-19 could privilege investments where you can create or can contribute in a more substantial way to creating jobs, so reacting to the unemployment and having a more impact on the GDP. And the fact is, it's not my opinion, that investing in renewables will create more jobs and will have a more positive impact on GDP. In fact, the COVID has not impacted on the creation of new renewable capacity. At least it's not impacted as in other sectors. Because in 2020, we had the record of installed capacity of renewables, 50% more respect the present year. And in 2021, again, we have had more than 260 gigawatts of renewable installed capacity in the world. And just to give you an idea, this means that the 80% of new installed capacity in the world is coming from renewables last year. So it's evident that how renewables has been resilient to the COVID pandemic if you compare with other sectors.
I think there is an imperative that the climate action cannot only just coincide with development, it must accompany it. In the recent years, we actually have seen that climate change impacts, which are already happening, they are affecting the economic growth. I'm just coming out of Pakistan, Islamabad, and the country, together with the rest of the subcontinent, is going through the heat wave. Right, so, and that is probably partially caused by the climate change. And because of this heat wave, actually, the economic activity is being affected in a very negative way, both in terms of water resource management, health, and agriculture. So we think that climate change action should be taken because the climate change impacts the most vulnerable and poorest segments of the population. And we need to build resilience of communities, ecosystems, and the economy as a whole. Second, of course, as the countries move to implementation of the NDCs, or national determined contributions, they can demonstrate how they tackle climate change while pursuing industrial development. So in the process of fulfilling of these NDCs, there will be new opportunities, new technologies for them to develop new industries. In renewable energy, new agriculture market, building efficiency, adoptions, electrical vehicles, and other new service industries.
When we discuss about smart energy, it is obviously, the electrical vehicles, smartphones being, powered by solar energy, clean cooking, and so on and so forth. So pick one. For example, how close are we solving the storage issue in electrical power, battery power?
Now, battery storage is one of the innovations that have become much, much more important over the last sort of 5 years. But I think it's important to understand that the battery storage there's really two sort of ways of looking at it. The main way that the industry uses battery storage is in conjunction with solar and wind projects. So traditional energy, the gas-fired power plant produces 100 megawatts all the time, flat, no movement. Sun and wind produces power like this. There's variation. And the sun and the wind energy changes all the time, so you have variation in your output. Battery storage is generally used to modulate that, to reduce the impact of the variability in the output of wind farms and solar farms. So we see today more and more solar and wind farm development will be accompanied by a battery to reduce the impact of the variability. But it's not to take it away. The other way of looking at it, if you look at batteries as an actual baseload power generation system to actually completely take away the variability, it's a very, very different business model. Picking up what you said about smart cities, if you allow me, we are building in the Red Sea, a project called the Red Sea Project, which is a network of 16 hotels set on the coast in the Red Sea in a beautiful, beautiful area. And ACWA Power is the utility provider for this system. So we provide all the energy, water treatment, district cooling, and so on. And that area, or that development, is completely separated from the grid, and it's 100% renewable energy. It's powered by 300 megawatts of solar panels, which will produce power during the day, and then a battery, which will produce power at night. Now, the battery in the Red Sea project is 1.3 gigawatts. So it's an enormous battery. I mean, the next biggest battery, the one you hear about that Tesla built in South Australia, is 200 megawatts. So this is a scale completely different.
Extreme weather is becoming quite frequent these days, especially in Asia. Did this volatility change the attitude towards climate action? Have you observed anything? And how do you see innovation might be playing into this?
External financing still accounts for a large, actually, part of the funding for climate change, and that's where our focus is also. As I mentioned, we are committing to provide $100 billion US by year 2030 to climate change, and we're also working with other multilateral development banks, institutions, including IFC, on making sure that all of our interventions are aligned to the Paris Agreement. And we set for ourselves a very hard goal that for all the projects and programs which will be approved from July of next year in the public sector, they all have to be compliant with the Paris. And for our private sector interventions, by year 2025, all our projects have to be complied. And talking about innovation, I will mention again the financial innovation which we're working on is this energy transition mechanism. Again, we're working with the 3 pilot countries in Southeast Asia, Indonesia, Philippines, and Vietnam to come up with the clever financing mechanism to buy down the existing capacity of old coal-fueled power plants, retire them early, and replace them with a cleaner, renewable energy.
I mentioned at 1.5 degree world is still within reach if we can achieve, as per IPCC estimates, anywhere between $1.8 to $3.6 trillion a year in the energy systems alone. So that's the scale needed. However, in order to achieve it, you not only need the large-scale projects, you also need programmatic solutions that can enable smaller-scale projects and innovative approaches. So that's is small beautiful? Does it always have to be large and scale? And how do we broker the balance between the two seemingly contradictory needs of achieving this per annum very large scale of investments in smarter energy systems versus the fact that in reality, many of our markets are relatively small. That's on the one side, which requires small solutions.
Despite all the challenges, the future is very, very bright. There is a lot of capital, a lot of money looking for renewable energy, decarbonization solutions for investment. There is a lot out there. What needs to happen, there needs to be certainty as to projects and pipeline, and there needs to be real commitment to recognize that the advantage that most countries have is the resources in the sun and the wind, not just the resources in the ground. But the way that the programs can be the most successful is by long-term certainty.
One, it is not true that the renewables are variable and the other sources are not. Because what makes variable or not the source is the logistic, not the nature of the source. So stop talking about renewables as a variable source, because if we have the condition of the logistic, renewables can provide the base load easily. Okay, this is the first point, very brief. Second, and what's perhaps the main reason I'm here, because I wish to promote 2 initiatives over here. One is the Climate Investment Platform. We will organize the first investment forum in the occasion of the G20 Energy Transition Ministerial in Bali in 31st of August and 1st of September. I hope that many actors are here that can be there with us. And I'm here because I wish to sign. So I hope that we can meet again in the investment forum in Bali, and naturally next year for the number 2 of the Open Fund event. Thank you very much.